In this age of gender confusion, it's difficult to find advice you can trust to help protect your child from those who would seek to unduly influence them, setting them up to be manipulated and exploited. On Unmasking the Trans Movement, we discuss, educate, and deliver the info parents want and need to help their children, grandchildren, and even themselves.
Welcome to Unmasking the Trans Movement. Now, here's your host, Brad Wilder.
Welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today on the show, John has got Dr. Ann Gillies standing by. We're going to discuss the trans shooters clinic. Not just one, there's several, as you know. They don't get discussed a lot in the same kind of episode. So tonight we're going to go deep. We're going to talk about the clinical assessment of these trans shooters, what makes them tick, not to mention what the public doesn't really know. You've seen all the other stuff from everybody else out there, but you haven't necessarily seen from the experts. John and Ann, both trauma experts, both deal with so many deviant individuals throughout their lifetime that you can't even add them up on both hands or feet. It's amazing to see exactly what the work that they've accomplished over their lifetimes, and they still continue today to fight for the protection of both women and children. Welcome to the program to both of you. John, great to have you here. There's a lot to get to today. We tried an episode a week ago that ended up being, we'll say very long, and obviously there's so much to talk about because this comes from so many different places. But today we'll break it down. How many trans shooters are there to kick this all off?
Well, there's been a number of them. And before we start, Ann, welcome back. You are a world traveler, so it's always great to have our author, resident expert with us. So, Ann, thank you for being back with us.
Good to be here. I hope to be more consistent, John.
Well, you're doing your part up in Canada. I'm in the States, of course. So hopefully things will change in Canada as they have in the States, but we have a long way to go still until we eradicate the notion of trans. This is not going to get any better because it has a cult-like impact, and that's really what we're here to talk about. There's been a lot of stories now, or a lot of coverage of the most recent shooter in the U.S., trans shooter in Minnesota. And that's when I thought, let's cover this. And Ann, you are very qualified. I am, and Brad being a dad and a hockey coach, and you are qualified as well, right? We all are concerned. So
this just doesn't touch. It touches on heartstrings, right? This is so deviant and so grossly, deviant that how can you not? If you don't, then you're part of the problem and you're involved. Somehow you too have been deviantly subdued into porn. And that's a real bad place to be. And they're going to discuss some of that today for the listeners out there.
That's right. So there have been many. There's some memes out there, or screenshots of how many for us. So there are many, many school shooters.
I think I had 6 counted on one of the pictures. There was like a collage of them all, and there was 6 or 8. But that's 6 or 8 too many, you guys.
Well, I think there were 6 up until recently. I think it's at least 8, 9, or 10 now. We're just, and some of this stuff's being covered up. Of course, mainstream media doesn't want to talk about trans shooters. They'll talk about a male suspect, but they don't necessarily identify the individual. So, but those, they are being identified, which is really good. So that's where we're going today. So John, kick us off and let's talk about some of these horrific things that are happening.
Yeah, and I think the most productive thing really is how do we profile them? Now, again, big push against profiling. Well, we had better profile. When it comes to public safety, if you don't get a sense of whatever the population we're talking about, then people are going to be harmed. So whether we're talking about sexual predators, what's the profile of that? When it comes to shooters, what is the profile of that? So it's very concerning, and and with our combined clinical backgrounds, we can hopefully provide some insight that hasn't been discussed up until now. So I'm going to actually share. I've got a PowerPoint presentation. I was doing this recently and somebody said, John, you really ought to hide the thumbnails, but I'm going to keep those over on the left, preview of things to come. Let me jump to that just because I'm going to be moving back and forth so we have a flow to this. There's so much to cover, but the question is, what are people missing? A lot of things have been covered. Here's some of the explanations thus far, and all of them, except for the guns and gun violence. Now, obviously, gun violence is an issue, but guns are not the issue. We've had guns, at least in the U.S., ever since the 70s and 80s, and we didn't have this kind of thing. Anne, any thoughts about that, or Brad as well?
You know what? Their homesteaders in Canada had guns, and they didn't rape and pillage and children. Like, they were honest, for the most part, God-fearing people. And, guns have been part of our history too. And so, yeah, our government wants to take them away from us. And I think we're living in a time that's more precarious than ever. I'm not suggesting people go out and shoot people. Come on.
A loaded gun shoots no one, but a unstable mental person does, period. Yeah. They got the right tool in their hand, and think of it this way, the gun is a tool, and the person makes the tool work, period.
And just legal like gun owners have had, they've gone through the courses, they've done their due diligence, and they legally have guns in their homes for a reason, and anyways, I'm not going to get into the whole thing with gun laws other than I totally support them, because it's the illegal gun owners who are the problem. So, but let's talk about these media myths, because, John, you put this out there. The media blames the parents. And, I have to say that psychology has been blaming the parents for their children's mental health. And there's some issues there, obviously, but for their children's behavior, just problem behavior, like conduct disorder, right? So it's the parents' fault. Well, sometimes the parents should put some boundaries, and there's some other things going on. But we have to look at who's to blame for, like, the actions of a 23-year-old.
Who's old enough to have graduated from college, by the way.
And obviously healthy enough to go to college. So
still living at home, though, under mom's rule. And again, there lies part of this issue, is that, again, there's a lack of parenting that should have been addressed well before the age of 23 to help this individual stay on course and not get caught up in all of this trans mess that he's in.
Well, we have this whole thing, Brad, with failure to launch. Parents are, their children are still living at home, often not working, not employed. And there is this whole failure to launch in this trans representation as well. I believe that.
John, is it fair to say that children who are left alone at any age, say from their teens all the way through into obviously the age of 23, and are left at home during the daytime and the parents are away, it gives them a chance to really, I think, get into some of the things that you're going to discuss a little bit later on, which is the psyche of the brain and how it changes just from looking at pornographic images and what that can do to an individual. I'm wondering if these trans shooters are really getting into things like staying at home and being deviant in their bedrooms all day long by themselves.
Right, screen time, and I know you've talked about it, all of us as parents and then professionals in society, we need to be concerned about what's happening because of the online influence, and that's such a big part of the groomers and those that seek within the quote-unquote trans movement, the LGBTQ radicals. And again, you're going to find predators anywhere, but wherever kids, and especially vulnerable kids, congregate, well, It's just right for the picking within the trans movement. These are unstable, vulnerable kids. And so the predators go online, and parents are tired these days. They just want some quiet. Well, we think as long as a kid is quiet looking at their phone, everything's fine.
Well, it starts a lot younger than the 23-year-old. He's had years of conditioning, so to speak, and then you get to this point. So, yeah. But yes, the media does blame a lot of things instead of the individual's behavior.
There were some really good points you had on that slide. Maybe you can bring that back up again, because there's a few more things I think you guys want to discuss there. The mental illness is one of them. Medication falls into this too, John. So what's up with the meds?
Well, Brad, before we do that, sorry for the, I just want to, what we're after is balance right here. And the pendulum has swung. It used to be that the parents were fully supported to a fault. Right? You can have abusive parents that nobody suspects, and the kids are having to suffer. In psychology, the pendulum swung to every ill or every illness, as it were, that a kid has. It must be the result of the parents. I want to just add a balance out of the book of Deuteronomy, right? That God says this: parents must not be put to death for the sins of their children. You can tell an extreme thing in that case, nor children for the sins of their parents. Those deserving to die must be put to death for their own crimes. AI did a nice summary, right? What are the key points? Individual accountability. The verse states that parents will not be put to death for the sins of their kids, vice versa, and personal consequences. So we have lost that in this day and age. We need to have a balance. So we need to be able to have parents think deeply about their role and make sure they're doing as much as they can do. But at the same time, you can have good parents and a kid that goes bad. We call it bad seed. That's always questionable to use that phrase, but strong-willed. I know my wife was a 30-year second grade school teacher, and she has indicated over those years she could tell. There's sort of a joke that she had among other teachers. They poured their hearts into these kids, but they called them future felons of America. Right? She could just tell that there were some kids, even at that age, that were just driven to, now, again, at that age, what's going on at home. But you could see a streak of willfulness as well. And so it starts early. And so we need to have a balance. Now, again, genetic is nature is nurture, all those. But the fact that the media was blaming this, they jumped to the mother at first. It turns out the father apparently was the one that was affirming. But I thought, you know what? When did we ever reach a point where we blame a parent for the actions of someone that's at the age of graduating from college? We need to finally say, you know what, at some point in time, we have to look at the individual. I used to work in prison, and how many of those guys would still have parents calling in trying to rescue them, or would talk about it was their upbringing, when in fact, no, your upbringing doesn't make you pull your penis out of your pants and sexually assault or rob or beat someone. So, okay, medication, and we have talked about the concerns of that. That's all over the... Now, when I say media myths, I'm not downplaying any of this, but it's not solely any of these. So, Anne, what are your concerns about, like, SSRIs, some of the antidepressants?
Yeah. What's coming out now is of course, all of the mental health medication that children are being put on at very young ages and what it's doing to them and to their brains. And I don't have a lot of specifics on that, but we know that any medication over a long period of time begins to alter physiology. And so, antidepressants, anxiety meds, things for psychosis, there's just so many medications, and kids are so highly medicated. When I was growing up, nobody in my school was medicated. And, if two boys, 10-year-old boys ticked each other off, there was a fisticuff, it was over. And, the next recess, they were playing together. I mean, there was this normalcy of working out your frustration in a different way. And I'm not suggesting everybody punch and hit. But, there was this, it wasn't just that kind of happening, but there was a lot of interaction and physical exercise that kids do not get. So instead of, putting them on the ADHD meds, maybe we should think about training and teaching boys differently.
You know what kids actually get out of having that schoolyard scrap at the end of the day? Is confidence. Confidence. Confidence to move forward as a man. At the end of the day, whether it's two girls fighting, the girl walks away with girl confidence and the boy walks away with boy confidence. Why? Because they actually didn't back down. They didn't cower. They didn't feel belittled. They stood up for themselves. And that's, I think, what society needs more of. We know the difference between right and wrong. We just don't bring it into our lives quite enough on a daily basis for some reason that we can be misled down the wrong path in a heartbeat.
Well, and I think we focus so much on emotions in our education, in schooling, in, how are you feeling? And, it's so out of balance. I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about those things, but, when I was growing up, those weren't talked about in the classroom.
No,
right?
I feel like I'm going to go beat Johnny up at the playground right after we get out of recess here, or get into recess here, like...
The principal's
We're not
office.
advocating, right? But
that's the old days.
We've gone from that. Nobody expresses how they're really feeling to the teacher, and but they did talk to each other. Kids talk to each other, But now we have all of this need to express your emotion, a need to express your sexuality. We've just got a mess. And then we have these kids, and the media blames it on the parents. And the parents, there's obviously issues sometimes at home. That can happen. But then you put medication, and you put that together with
isolation.
Isolation, yes, because children get home. And, we lost it really. And I think back even to my parenting. I sent my kids to daycare, did all that stuff. But really, we lost it when moms decided that babies should be in daycare. And back to that attachment injury right early on in life. And so we've got a whole mess that we have to rectify.
That's right.
So, but this affirmation stuff, John, that suggestion that because you don't affirm someone's ideology, their delusion, if you don't affirm a lie, because it's a lie to suggest that someone can be another biological sex, which they claim to be, then somehow you are, injuring that person for life. And of course, they'll be suicidal, as the doctors tell us, which is another lie. So we have to start telling truth, not only to the children, but to the parents. And because now we are in such a horrific season where some transgender individuals who've gotten caught up with other things, such as satanic and cult involvement, have now really turned to the dark side.
LGBTQ and the man-made psychological notion of trans, by nature, creates a very dangerous kind of emotional and psychological myopia, where focus becomes self. In that inverted world, freedom is promised, yet will never be able to be achieved, as it can only lead to progressive enslavement to one's passions and whims, and it offers and fosters the elusive and unrealistic goal of happiness without struggle. The key foundational building blocks of a truly satisfying life are never a part of the equation, such as genuine character development, moral and spiritual growth, and the development of key indicators of emotional and spiritual maturity are removed from the equation. Thus, the trans deception offers a pipe dream at best, but in actuality, it delivers progressive doses of pain, dissatisfaction, discontentment, and resentment. Additionally, there is a distinct anti-Christian bias, thus leaving out any hope of spiritual wholeness and sense of purpose, strength, and brotherly kindness, charity, any need for character development, stewardship, and any fear of future accountability, payday someday. Without a sense of eternal accountability, conscience becomes something relegated to old-fashioned and outdated, hindering notions of objective moral and ethical truth. Truth becomes relative, self becomes the determiner and arbiter of ethics and morals, and the ultimate ethos becomes, do what thou wilt, and, if it feels good, do it. Ignoring the depravity within the human heart and the reality of spiritual darkness opens oneself up to doing the very things that invite spiritual darkness and unleashes the progressive depravity within the human heart. Fueling such fallen inclination with self-gratification will inevitably lead to progressing into and through the various degrees of progressive selfishness, callousness, lewdness, lasciviousness, deviance, and depravity. This is exactly what we see fostered and fanned into flame by those who find themselves entering into the shark-infested waters of the so-called trans community, where sophisticated predators wait in abundance, just below the shallows. Little would these naive young people suspect that dark, twisted, and deviant adults are waiting for them, to help entice them, and help introduce them to deviant sexuality, helping them override their boundaries, inhibitions, and consciences, making them easy prey for such predatory AGP maps. Who want to sissify them, so as to manipulate them, then violate them.
That's. I thought I might play for us a couple of paragraphs I put together on speaking to this issue.
LGBTQ and the man-made psychological notion of trans, by nature, creates a very dangerous kind of emotional and psychological myopia, where focus becomes self. In that inverted world, freedom is promised, yet will never be able to be achieved, as it can only lead to progressive enslavement to one's passions and whims, and it offers and fosters the elusive and unrealistic goal of happiness without struggle.
Yeah, this is a killer. Satisfaction is such a funny riddle in human life. Satisfaction is the joy you get after struggle. There's so much joy you get because of human endeavor that requires effort. And humans are made to do hard things. Humans are made to work and to get a payoff for it. And the sheer joy that you get after you do something really hard, which you've done so many, as an ultra endurance athlete, this is sort of the sine qua non. Lots of sacrifice, lots of pain, and then a big payoff. But life is like that. If you're going through life and you're trying to get joy without struggle, you're not going to get that second macronutrient of happiness. So, for example, if you're, I tell my students, you can cheat on my exam. It's pretty easy to cheat on my exams. But if you get an A, you won't feel any satisfaction from it. On the other hand, if you work, it's an A on an exam. It's meaningless, but you'll get a lot of satisfaction if you worked really, really hard for it. That's the first part, which is that it requires struggle to get that little bit of joy. But the real riddle about satisfaction is that Mother Nature tells us that if you get it, it's going to last, and it doesn't.
Yeah.
So Mick Jagger sings, "I can't get no satisfaction." That's wrong. If you couldn't get it, you wouldn't keep trying and trying and trying, like the song goes. The problem is you can't keep no satisfaction. And that's the thing that you never quite figure out. And we understand the brain science behind that, but we have to, once again, we have to diverge from Mother Nature's teachings or Mother Nature's urges that she gives us and do something on the divine path. And if we do certain things that feel quite unnatural, we can make satisfaction stick around. I believe those answers. A lot of people don't have answers. For why are you alive? I don't know. For what would you be willing to die? I don't know. And the problem, there's a meaning crisis in your life, which is arguably the most difficult and most complicated and most beautiful and sort of manifold aspect of happiness, because it involves so much unhappiness. You didn't find the answers to the questions you just gave me except through tremendous pain. You didn't. If you had not gone through a lot in your life and suffered, you wouldn't know that. You never said, when I found the meaning of my life is that week at the beach in Ibiza. That's not when you find meaning in your life. It's when you get sick and you don't die. When you lose somebody, when you're rejected, when you're afraid. Those are the moments when you actually learn the answers to that. And I meet people all the time who are trying to avoid unhappiness so much that they never find meaning in their lives. It's like it's the opposite of the hippie generation. If it feels good, do it, which is terrible advice. Even worse is if it feels bad, make it stop. If I'm in pain, it means there's a problem and I'm defective. If there is suffering, I must treat it immediately and make it go away. That's folly, because that's the way to avoid meaning. And if you avoid meaning, you're not going to find happiness.
Yeah, pain is the teacher.
It is.
It is the guide that ultimately delivers many a person to the promised land of trying to understand greater meaning and purpose in their lives.
Suffering is incredibly sacred. You just can't waste it.
All of the great answers that I have sought throughout my life have come through the crucible of suffering and pain. And I've often thought, does it have to be that way? I know for a lot of people, they're able to figure that out short of those experiences. But I'm also always very careful to rob people of, the beauty of what can come when somebody is enduring something challenging. Obviously, you don't want anyone you care about to be suffering unnecessarily, but there is something divine about that process that makes me step aside and just want to allow them to have that process for themselves,
including your kids.
Yeah,
it's just horrible.
That's the hardest one.
But you know perfectly that they need to suffer too, because they need to grow and they need meaning and they deserve meaning. And the idea that we would take all of the suffering out of their lives or protect them from the vicissitudes, the slings and arrows of, the things that happen to us, and don't do this. And it's not right. It's not right, because you have to live a full existence. Suffering will find them, and trying to deliver them from it, all it will do is spoil your relationship with them, ultimately.
Yeah, there's a thing in the book where you field the question of like, well, if I avoid suffering in, my life, how does that work with happiness? Like, don't worry, suffering's going to find you. Like you're not avoiding suffering. I don't care, what trajectory you're on.
It'll hunt you down.
Life has a way.
It does.
The key foundational building blocks of a truly satisfying life are never a part of the equation, such as genuine character development, moral and spiritual growth, and the development of key indicators of emotional and spiritual maturity are removed from the equation, such as pain tolerance, resilience, and contentment. Thus, the trans deception offers a pipe dream at best, but in actuality, it delivers progressive doses of pain, dissatisfaction, discontentment, and resentment. Additionally, there is a distinct anti-Christian bias, thus leaving out any hope of spiritual wholeness, which comes from reconciliation with one's Creator, and sense of purpose, strength, and brotherly kindness, charity, any need for character development, stewardship, and any fear of future accountability, payday someday. Without a sense of eternal accountability, conscience becomes something relegated to old-fashioned and outdated, hindering notions of objective, moral, and ethical truth. Truth becomes relative. Self becomes the determiner and arbiter of ethics and morals, and the ultimate ethos become do what thou wilt, and if it feels good, do it. Ignoring the depravity within the human heart and the reality of spiritual darkness opens oneself up to doing the very things that invite spiritual darkness and unleashes the progressive depravity within the human heart. Fueling such fallen inclination with self-gratification will inevitably lead to progressing into and through the various degrees of progressive selfishness, callousness, lewdness, lasciviousness, deviance, and depravity. This is exactly what we see fostered and fanned into flame by those who find themselves entering into the shark-infested waters of the so-called trans community, where sophisticated predators wait in abundance just below the shallows, waiting for the unsuspecting, the naive, the disgruntled, or the willful and defiant, to wade in, where they're told the waters are both safe and affirming. Little would these naive young people suspect that dark, twisted, and deviant adults are waiting for them to help entice them and help introduce them to deviant sexuality, helping them override their boundaries, inhibitions, and consciences, making them easy prey for such predatory AGPM APS, and those who want to sissify them so as to manipulate them, then violate them.
And any thoughts about that? It's kind of what we're talking.
I'm just listening to you, and I'm reminded of Marshall Kirk, back in and writing the Gay Manifesto, which he said was later just sarcasm, but everything in that manifesto has come to be true and is happening in our culture right now. And one of the things he said is, we will sodomize your sons. And we idolize young men, teens particularly, and young boys. And, it isn't just boys, of course, but they were, at that point, this was the Gay Manifesto. They were focused on homosexual relationships. We've gone far beyond that now. We've gone into every kind of deviance imaginable. But yeah, there is an agenda, and they hate that word, but there's been a strategy since the 70s. And
this is the Gay Manifesto by Michael Swift, first published in Gay Community News, February 15th to the 21st in 1987. It is also reprinted in the Congressional Record. This is what it states. We shall sodomize your sons, emblems of your feeble masculinity, of your shallow dreams and vulgar lies. We shall seduce them in your schools, in your dormitories, in your gymnasiums, in your locker rooms, in your sports arenas, in your seminaries, in your youth groups, in your movie theater bathrooms, in your army bunkhouses, in your truck stops, in all your male clubs, in your House of Congress, whenever men are with men together. Your sons shall become our minions and do our biddings. They will be recast into our image. All laws banning homosexual activity will be revoked. Instead, legislation shall be passed which engenders love between men. All homosexuals stand together as brothers. We shall triumph only when we present a common face to the vicious heterosexual enemy. If you dare to cry faggot, it states, fairy, queer at us, we will stab you in your cowardly hearts and defile your dead, puny bodies. We will unmask the powerful homosexuals who masquerade as heterosexuals. You will be shocked and frightened when you find that your presidents and their sons, your industrialists, your senators, your mayors, your generals, your athletes, your film stars, your television personalities, your civic leaders, your priests, are not the safe, familiar, heterosexual figures you assume them to be. We are everywhere. We have infiltrated your ranks. Be careful when you speak of homosexuals because we are always among you. We may be sitting across the desk from you. We may be sleeping in the same bed with you. All churches who condemn us will be closed. Our only gods are handsome young men. For us, too much is not enough. All males who insist on remaining stupidly heterosexual will be tried in homosexual courts of justice and will become invisible men. We shall rewrite history filled and debased with your heterosexual lies and distortions. We shall be victorious because we are filled with the ferocious bitterness of the oppressed who have been forced to play seemingly bit parts in your dumb heterosexual shows throughout the age. We too are capable of firing guns and manning the barricades of the ultimate revolution. Tremble, hetero swine, when we appear before you without our masks.
And now, after all these years, I mean, it's been growing and growing, and people don't want to talk about the LGB. They're okay with the T because people are beginning to say, wow, there's something wrong in this world. It doesn't quite all add up. And they're saying born this way, just like the gays and lesbians did. Maybe we need to pay attention, but we need to understand this started with homosexual activists in the 70s and 80s. And so it's been a strategy for decades and about, raping our children.
I wrote a book, From Queer to Christ. I was in the homosexual lifestyle for 25 years, and my father is a Baptist minister. I live in the USA, and I basically discuss how the foundation was laid as to why I went into the gay lifestyle and what God had to do to reveal the lies and expose the deception, and how he got me out of that lifestyle. So that was really kind of covered in part one, if you guys want to go back and review that. But what I really wanted to do tonight was, one of the things that just absolutely infuriates me is when I see people who really have no idea what this, not only the agenda is, but what the lifestyle is really like. They're just looking at it as, oh, I have a gay or lesbian friend or trans, and I want to love them and be supportive. And you think you're doing the right thing, but you really don't know how you are sending them down a path to where it is a destructive and dangerous lifestyle on many levels. And since especially the woke Christians want to accuse people like me, well, you're not being loving, and the gay men will attack me. And, it's not because of what I'm saying is a lie. It's because how dare you expose it. But I don't want to see anybody lose 25 years of their life like I did, thinking that I was going to find something at the end of the gay rainbow, which you will never find. And that was true peace, happiness, and joy, peace of mind. And so tonight, I want to say to these woke Christians and to the parents who have children where you are supporting them, I'm not going to filter myself tonight. Because when I went into the lifestyle, I was very naive. I just thought, oh, you just go into a gay bar, you'll meet some gay men, you have a drink, you mingle, and maybe you will connect with someone and become boyfriends and live happily ever after. Stupid and naive I was. Well, not stupid, but just really naive. It wouldn't take long for me to really see how dark and destructive this lifestyle was going to be. And within 3 years of me just going into that lifestyle, ending up battling drugs, alcohol, depression, actually attempting to take my life. I was a prostitute, a hustler, that's the male form of it, and had a sex addiction. And what I want to expose is what your children, your boys and girls, are going to be exposed to when they go into that lifestyle. Because what Hollywood and the media, especially the scum, liberal mainstream media, who will never tell the truth and who will never allow stories like mine to be told, who are silencing the detransitioners from the trans movement, who are warning about what happens when they go down that path. I want to just kind of put it in your face tonight and say, if you really want to support this, here's exactly what you're really pushing them into. And there will be some within the LGBT community who are going to push back and say, well, that's your experience. That's not mine. I've not done this. I don't care what they say, because what I'm saying is the norm. It's not the exception. And if you spend any time in that lifestyle, and especially in the larger cities, you will be exposed to this, and it's going to get more dark and dangerous, because as anyone knows who's ever been in any form of bondage, whether it's drugs, alcohol, pornography, sex, shopping, even food addictions, you start out with the vanilla stuff, and eventually it doesn't satisfy anymore, and you start moving into the more hardcore, darker side of things.
So that's what's happening. And of course, this murder is an extension in a sense of that. They're unfulfilled sexual desires. What you said, John, it's this sense of self-gratification, because it's all about them and what they want, with no sense of or thought, perhaps, and certainly no emotion, no feeling of what they're doing to others by their own behavior and their choices. And for them, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much they hurt their parents. It doesn't matter grandma and grandpa, oh, who cares about them? All that's important is their own selfish desires. And that's really sad. Whenever we get to a culture like that, it's bound to implode.
I like to say that this all started to change, I think, back in the 70s or even, late 60s. It started when color TV came into play. People didn't continue to sit at the kitchen tables and have dinner together, lunches together. The socializing of family has gone to the wayside, and I think that was a kickoff. People started gathering in front of the TV idiot box, watching the news, watching, whatever was on back then, but it didn't matter. It took your attention off of family focus time, which, you want to hear about what your family's done. I know that I'm guilty of falling into that with my family. My family still does it. Here I am at 57 years old, and I still see my kid take their meal and go to their room and eat their meal in their room, and I still see my wife jump in front of the TV just like I do and watch TV while we're having supper. We've been part of that, and to be honest with you, I never thought I'd be saying this, and maybe I'm getting old, but I'm really regretting missing those times that we should have been there and we weren't. And the communication, the family time, the lack of just being together in that kind of a way took away so much from family, takes away so much from families. It took a lot away from mine, as Dr. Ann is already more than aware of. But it's something that's needed back in front of us again as we move forward. Families need to stick tight, close. World's about to change, but I thought that was important that we look back. You mentioned 70s, and I agree with you that it's somewhere in that time frame that things got messed up. And we talked about family, we talked about mental health, we talked about medications. We've stopped all the good things that Happy Days used to bring, and now what we see is this separation, this dividedness, this lack of family cohesion, lack of really understanding one another and helping your children grow while you're there at that dinner table having friendly conversation about the day and dreams and everything else that you should be talking about as a family. I like to smack myself with a shoe, right? Like it's that clear to me now, and I'm really sorry I missed that part.
I think, Brad, a lot of parents did. I mean, I'm really blessed that, well, I was just really strict. The dinner table was our time, to kind of have dinner together and talk however long. And we would have heated discussions, debates. Oh my goodness. My children, there were 8 of us around the table, so my children didn't always agree with each other. Sometimes dinner was like, just a minute, let's have some peace here. But you know what? There were really good memories there. And I think what you're saying, Brad, is really true. I think the other thing about that, though, is that I'm seeing a movement where young parents are switching off the TV. In fact, I'm seeing a movement where they don't even have TVs in their house. I'm
True
like,
story.
yeah.
And you get enough on your devices all day long. You don't really need a TV anymore.
Well, that's true, but still, no devices at the table, dinner table. I mean, there's some simple things parents can put in place, and no devices in the bedroom.
That's
where, let's start talking boundaries. If you want to blame parents, then let's educate parents. Let's go back to the simple things and say, okay, here's what you need to help your child with. If you want to keep them from being deviant in the future, and there's no one can say the outcome, no one knows, but at least let's give them the best training they can have and help them by giving them boundaries to start with as children, and then, keep an eye on what they're doing.
So John, let's kind of revamp or I guess touch up on where we are at in the show. We're about a half an hour in, and we've talked about a lot of different things so far, but we're right now in the middle of discussing how these shooters end up, being the way that they are. We're talking about parents' involvement. We're talking about medications. We're talking about that transition into isolation that creates a window of opportunity to be deviant when you're home alone and do things that others aren't around to see you do. And it transforms your brain. So we've left them isolated in their bedrooms. We've left them uncommunicating with anyone. They're on their devices. They're watching pornography. Their brain waves are changing. What else could we possibly do to these poor kids? Oh my God.
That's right. And, before we move on, I do want to plug some of Ann's books. I had asked Ann to have one of those handy that she thought would be most applicable. And you want to share with the audience the one book that you think would help them right now kind of understand what sets the stage for this.
Yeah, well, this is about gender affirming care. So the book that I was suggesting was The Ultimate Deception, The Truth of Gender Affirming Care. So
they can get that on
Amazon, yeah, Indigo, and yeah, and I was just looking at the back here because sometimes I forget what I've written, and I'm saying I'm taking this ideology further. I believe there are many snakes in the grass. They're no longer hiding. They're in plain sight promoting a false ideology, and they're intending to lie bluntly to people. And the venom of gender ideology is what we're seeing today when we're talking about all of the issues that come along with that. And so when you lie to children from the time they're in kindergarten, you create an atmosphere of confusion. And so their brain begins to change. And there's some things that happen. And then you put them on puberty blockers when they're 10 years old. And then again, hormones, 14, 15, it's affecting them really, really severely. And I think cognitively we're seeing some of the effect of that. But gender affirming care is not kind or compassionate. It is actually very harmful. And it's hateful.
And you know what? The teachers in our school system throughout Canada are doing exactly that to our kids for 8 hours a day times 5 days a week. And you sit there as parents and do nothing. Yeah, sit there in silence. Not you guys, but the rest of the viewers. Sit there in silence. Wonder why. Start to question your own morals and ethics. You're right and wrong right now.
Well, let me read this to you, John, just before you go on.
Yes, please.
About 12 years ago, Ken Zucker, who you're aware of from Canada, who treated gender identity disordered children, which was the previous diagnosis, said this. He said there's several predictors that create an adolescent with gender identity disorder. Lower IQ, lower social class, immigrant status, non-intact family, childhood behavioral problems related to gender identity disorder. And those are underlying issues. And then you have, those are just to begin with. So these are vulnerable children. We've talked about that all the time. We already have vulnerable children. Then we confuse them to death in the classroom. And it's like it just plays into this deviance, but also the violence that we're now seeing.
But I found a group that accepts me, Mom and Dad. Right?
And, maybe Dr. Zucker would come on the program and renounce the gender dysphoria notion as far as pushing that. It made it billable, the DSM-5. He was a part of that. He has not come out and recanted. I believe he and Blanchard have the blood of kids on their hands. Why? Because without their work in the DSM-5, published in 2013, none of this would have been billable. So if ever they want to come on the program and talk as clinicians, we could all talk together, and they could just go back to what was in the DSM-4. We talked about media, and again, the influences. I'm going to go over here because
hey, John,
yes, Anne.
Do you think we should introduce what the incidences themselves, in case people haven't caught up to that, first of all?
That's exactly well put. Okay, so we're going to look at, we're going to see this phrase over on the left. That comes from one of the Batman movies, Why So Serious? And then we're also going to see with the female shooter down below. She drew a picture, and there's a very famous phrase that comes out of the movie, The Shining. So when we're talking about the Minneapolis shooter, we talked about, again, what are the influences? We call them myths. Again, these are consideration, but these are not the issue. And by the way, mental illness, what constitutes mental illness, people with depression, and why can we say this was not mental illness? It's certainly abnormal, but people with depression or bipolar who are sick enough to perpetrate a mass murder of children do not act normal. And they are not able to fool professionally trained criminal profilers in a gun store will see a video where how normal he's acting, the shooter, or the would-be shooter. Psychotic people, and therefore we're going to eliminate, he was depressed, he's bipolar, and I have not seen any story that he was on SSRIs. Okay, psychotic people, so we might say, well, he was crazy. Well, psychotic people are noticeably odd, especially prior to perpetrating a heinous violent effect. I worked with a lot of, in Pennsylvania, they call it GBMI, guilty but mentally incompetent, not competent to stand trial. I've worked with a lot of those folks. And then the other remaining issue, well, maybe as a cluster B personality disorder, I recommend people go on, if you want to study what personality disorders are, that is right out of the APA, and essentially what it's talking about is if it's not a mood disorder, that mood changes, it may be personality. And the DSM has broken what they call personality disorders into three aspects. The first one, cluster A, I mean, there's similarities. These are the odd individuals. B, those are the people that are very energetic, and the one common denominator is it's all about self. And then you have those that are reclusive or want to stay away from people. So if any of us have heard the term cluster B personality, it's really looking at four, but there can be a combination. So you have antisocial, and that's really going against social norms. Some people say, well, that can be well adjusted. Actually, then you're getting into, so antisocial inevitably have difficulty adjusting with social relationships, difficulty at work. These are the ones that are getting fired multiple times. They don't fit in technically to be antisocial. So for an antisocial diagnosis as an adult, you're usually going to see what's called a conduct disorder in adolescence. That's the kid you can't do anything with. So antisocial is different than asocial, which means it doesn't like people. So the term antisocial is it's going against societal norms, and so they don't do well on the job. They usually you will find either tattoos or multiple arrests, and they just the bad boy kind of thing. But if they fit into public life, so they go into politics or any other normal field and they can keep a job, you're really talking about sociopathy or psychopathy. Borderline, that's the back and forth, that's the crazy making one. They love you, then they hate you. Idealize people, then devalue. Histrionic, that's very dramatic. That is the actor or actress. And narcissism, that just means it's all about self. But you have simple narcissists, those are the ones that stand out in a crowd, are always combing their hair, they want to look good. Or the professional grade, or what's called malignant narcissism, that is, it's all about self, but they really won't let you know. So they're working it. And that's the precursor for anything else that's going to progress from there. So we could say that these individuals, that go in and shoot schools, right? They're certainly antisocial. They may be borderline. They may be histrionic. But we're going to see that this young man didn't fit any of that. As a matter of fact, let's now go into, we're going to see him before he committed his crime. I was very impressed with this podcaster, The Daily Discourse with Arturo. He did a very nice job. So we're going to look at his behavior, and there were, according to the owner of this gun store, there were 3 trained professional staff, and nobody saw anything that stood out, and that's what stands out to the owner, that nothing stood out.
Their hardest to ignore the signs, to make sure that he could live a normal life without, being looked into and being watched and being examined or anything like that. But the FBI is now classifying him as a nihilistic, violent extremist. So let's check this out.
New details are coming to light tonight on what may have motivated the gunman at Annunciation Church. The shooter appears to fit the profile of a new type of criminal, becoming so pervasive that the FBI and Justice Department have created a new classification for it called nihilistic violent extremist. The agency says these criminals are motivated by a fundamental rejection of society and a desire to cause its collapse. Lou Raguse joins us with more. Lou?
Wow. Well, Julie, to put it simply, a nihilist just wants to see the world burn. And the actions and writings of Robin Westman mirror others whom the FBI has classified as a nihilistic violent extremist.
Now, when your package arrives, you'll get 2 boxes. one for your generator, and one for your expansion pack.
We didn't have school shootings.
In his 30 years with the FBI,
That he could live a normal life without, being looked into and being watched and being examined or anything like that. But the FBI is now classifying him as a nihilistic, violent extremist. So let's check this out.
New details are coming to light tonight on what may have motivated the gunman at Annunciation Church. The shooter appears to fit the profile of a new type of criminal, becoming so pervasive that the FBI and Justice Department have created a new classification for it called nihilistic violent extremist. The agency says these criminals are motivated by a fundamental rejection of society and a desire to cause its collapse. Lou Ragoose joins us with more. Lou?
Wow. Well, Julie, to put it simply, a nihilist just wants to see the world burn. And the actions and writings of Robin Westman mirror others whom the FBI has classified as a nihilistic violent extremists.
We didn't have school shootings.
In his 30 years with the FBI, retired Special Agent in Charge Nick O'Hara dealt with criminals with destructive mindsets who killed by other means.
We had aircraft hijackings. We had tampering with consumer products.
But O'Hara recognizes the type of criminal now classified by the FBI as nihilistic violent extremists.
A lot of it is looking for attention. They have no other way to get it. So they are violent. They're misdirected. They think the world's going to hell, which it isn't. And they are going to help it get there.
Yeah, it does sound like Antifa, honestly. We see these people lashing out, doing very, very, very violent things. I'm talking about leaving bombs at the showroom of a Tesla factory or a Tesla, the place where they sell the Tesla vehicles. I can't even think right now. Bombing Tesla vehicles. Imagine like how they lashed out when they thought Elon Musk was stealing their information and taking away their benefits from them, right? We saw people pulling over Tesla vehicles and punching old women that were just driving to work or something because they hated Elon Musk so much. Yeah, these people are crazy, man. These leftist extremists, even though, Hakeem Jeffries looks at us and said, oh, these MAGA extremists. What's so extreme about us? We literally don't do anything but vote and go to work. Like, it's not even close to similar.
I first used the phrase in court papers regarding a Wisconsin teen who killed his parents and hatched a plan to assassinate President Trump and overthrow the U.S. government. An agent wrote that the goal of nihilistic violent extremists, quote, derived primarily from the hatred of society at large and a desire to bring about its collapse by sowing indiscriminate chaos, destruction, and social instability. The FBI noted the Wisconsin teen writing in Cyrillic alphabet, just like the disturbing journals of Annunciation Catholic Church shooter Robin Westman. Much of Westman's manifesto mirrors that nihilistic philosophy. In one entry, Westman wrote about sitting with hate and contempt for this world, and later, I just want to inflict that pain on the whole world.
They want destruction, whether they create it themselves or whether they're a part of it. That's kind of their goal because they've given up. They've just given up.
Now, the FBI is yet to officially weigh in on how they classify Westman. Retired Special Agent in Charge O'Hara says that the FBI unit that focuses on criminal profiles likely will use information that they gather in hopes of helping local authorities try to prevent future shootings.
We got some new footage of the shooter of Minneapolis. We're not going to say his name. However, the news loves to say his preferred name, which I heavily dislike. But last night, we got some footage of the shooter purchasing weapons just 5 days before the shooting happened.
Tonight, 5 Investigates has new video of the Annunciation Church shooter in a local gun shop 5 days before the attack last week.
Let's get right to investigative reporter Eric Rasmussen, who just obtained the video of Robin Westman.
Now, see, why do they have to say, first of all, his preferred name, and why do they have to say his name at all?
That video was recorded the Saturday before the shootings. And now the owner of Frontiersman Sports in St. Louis Park tells me the thing that stands out is that nothing stood out about the killer just days before they carried out that terrible attack.
Some now call it the face of evil.
So you're telling me this is a trans woman? This right here, this is I'm supposed to now believe this is a woman? That's a dude all day, okay? I mean, not even trying to be a woman. Like, this is Robert Westman, okay? So this whole trans shooter thing, what I'm just seeing here is just a psychopath. Honestly, just a regular everyday psychopath, all right?
Face of evil.
You know, the first time I watched all of this, I literally feel like I have to take a shower afterwards.
But when Robin Westman walked into this gun shop just days before shooting and killing children in Minneapolis,
we are devastated by this.
Owner Corey Krause says there were none of the classic warning signs.
He was friendly, he was jovial, he smiled, laughed, asked questions. He interacted with 3 of our staff in a friendly manner.
Cameras at Frontiersman Sports in St. Louis Park first recorded the would-be shooter just after 12:30 p.m.
Now, this is his dad's van that he's driving around. I think his dad was kind of like just enabling him to do whatever and say, here's the keys of the van, here's some money, here you go do stuff, right? And he's out here buying weapons. Now, he did not purchase any of the weapons he used in the shooting from this particular gun shop. We don't know where he got those weapons from, but these weapons right here were not used in the shooting. But this is still just 5 days before the event happened.
The Saturday before the attack, wearing a shirt with "A Place for Well-Being" on the back, they spent 40 minutes browsing, holding, and aiming a wide variety of guns. At one point, even speaking with a fellow customer. None of the behaviors Krause says his staff is trained to look out for.
What could I have done? What could I have caught? There was nothing.
These are still questions you ask yourself.
Because you had 3 layers of seasoned veteran employees that know this stuff, and they can sniff this stuff out from a mile away.
Krause says the shooter did not get any of the guns or ammunition used in the attack from his store, ultimately presenting a valid permit to purchase when buying a small .38 special revolver not mentioned in search warrants. While the victims and their families will never be able to face their attacker, Krause says he's sharing this video with us with the hope of someday answering questions about how and why this happened.
The public only knows so much right now, and if this can shed some light on how this person was and how they were acting and what we do to try to prevent it, because, I mean, we work very hard to try to prevent this type of stuff.
Krause tells me his staff already shared this video with federal investigators who came to his store last week while he was away. Now, by law, authorities tell me they cannot reveal or identify where the shooter got the weapons that were actually used in this attack.
What stood out is nothing stood out about
At all.
And these are
still so eerie to see.
He says his staff works hard to try to identify it. In this case, they didn't have much to work with.
Okay. Thank you.
Brad and Ann, your thoughts?
Well, you know, I'm listening to this and thinking, you know, how, you know, the whole social aspect and the hatred of society, hatred of people, hatred of anything but themselves, but really it comes down to self-hatred too. And, you know, the societal instability, I'm thinking back to the originator of queer theory. Her name was Gail somebody in the 80s. Can't remember her last name just right now, but queer theory is really what has changed. It has taken everything normal, because that was the whole thing. Anything that was normal, acceptable, and just the way society was supposed to be run was taken and turned upside down. So good is evil, and evil is good.
That's what anarchy does. It just turns everything.
That's exactly right. But that's what queer theory was all about, and that has so encompassed this young generation, because basically, without knowing what they're being taught, this is what they're being taught, to turn everything in society upside down.
You were talking about Gail Rubin.
Thank you, Brad.
Yes, no problem.
Yeah, and I mean, there was Fortney too, Michael Fortney, that was involved in that too. But for individuals really wanting to look into queer theory, I would advise you do it, because it explains so much about what's happening with these kids, because their world literally has been turned upside down. You and I, our generations, we didn't have that. And so we have this understanding of how the world should run. And we have, by and large, navigated throughout life. I mean, we all come away with bumps and bruises, but, you know, these individuals hate everything about the world, about people, and obviously about children. And it's the saddest thing, but culture has done it to them.
Culture, isolation, lack of parenting. There's so many topics, lack of God, lack of just right and wrong. And again, I got to come back to the isolation, because I think it's that isolation that allows an individual like this to create a world that is a fantasy world that he is in charge of, and that world gives that individual a level of confidence that he's not receiving from parents or peers or anyone else around him or her. It's a mental health issue, yes, but it's driven by so many different things that are going on within the family itself, to school, to relationships, to emotional breakdowns, all of this. And there's not just one thing. It wasn't the DSM-5's book that made all these people do this stuff, right? It was them monetizing it. But the reality here is that it's almost like society is throwing all this stuff onto these poor kids' shoulders and said, here, you guys deal with it.
Well, Brad, it's all about the deconstruction of society. That's what queer theory is about. And then the deconstruction of family, because family was a normal experience for centuries. and you know, parenting was a normal experience. And now all of that is turned upside down. So children are in this, you know, they're in quicksand. And so trying to keep their head above water, and some of them literally do these things that are just the most horrendous things we could ever imagine. That doesn't excuse their behavior.
To have the time to write that manifesto and deliver that at some point in a way that was part of that world that they created, is so heartbreaking, because it's the parents. The parents didn't pay attention at all, period. They just left them alone. And again, you said society, video games, there's a whole bunch of things that fall into that, because you're so isolated that you got to find something else to do. My kid sits in his room too and plays video games. Again, get your ass out off the bed and get on the couch with us, and let's watch a movie, or let's play a board game, or let's do something else. Let's go golfing. Let's go to the hockey rink. There's all kinds of options, but parents, they just don't want to engage. It's more about they take their time, they spend it on their phones, and they'll watch the idiot box to pass their till they hit the bed. And then when they're in bed, nothing happens again. And it's the same regurgitating cycle day after day for these kids. And we're the only ones, parents, who can break that cycle.
And you know what happened, though, Brad, many decades ago, that parents were bullied and intimidated by the LGBTQ activists. Quite honestly, to sit down, shut up, quit telling your kids that they shouldn't do these things. Don't tell us about your moral standards. Don't tell your kids about moral standards. Of course, don't take them to church. Intimidate. And, you know, parents are just trying to be parents, and they were trying to make a life for their children and their home, and they got tired of fighting back. And now we have to fight back. I think parents are realizing they don't have an option anymore, because our kids are going to hell in a handbasket, so to speak. And we need to step in. Parents have to step in at some point. Would that have saved this young boy? I mean, he's made his own decisions. And I think what you said about the isolation and all the things that are happening, somewhere along the line, when the children are a lot younger, parents need to be stepping in, like you said.
I'm self-employed. I've been doing it for over 30 years. I don't have a staff. So the isolation that I talk about is right here as well. I've had to deal with it myself, and it can be whether it's a parent or a child or a 23-year-old who's trying to figure themselves out still because things that they should have done 5 years ago, they didn't get to do, thanks to COVID, thanks to Dr. Fauci and other corrupt individuals in the medical system that created this problem and created this isolation and drove these kids to where they are today.
Well, now you have these, these COVID teens that are now acting out. And John, you have, I think you have something there about the rape of a 4-year-old.
That's right.
And just horrendous by a trans individual. And we're hearing more. I think that's the second one in Ontario in the last week. I don't think the other one was with the trans.
Yeah, this is in Canada, people. This isn't in the States. This is happening in our own country.
Oh, it's horrific. And people, I read one comment by a father who said, I just can't imagine. I have a 3-year-old daughter. How am I going to cope? How am I going to let her out of my sight? And the fear is there. And it's very scary in these cities. And people just running amok.
There we go.
I'm glad they're scared, you guys. I'm glad that those parents are fearful because that's where we live in the time that we're in. And if we're not scared, something's going to happen bad to your kid because it happens every single day. Kids are abducted and child molested and driven into places that you don't want to go.
That's right. Well, we'll add some of I think where we can add, Anne and Brad, that hasn't been talked about. So here are some of the contributing factors. So we talked about school affirmation, social contagion, of course, father's support for the trans deception. So it was really the dad that was doing it. The mom was frustrated. That affected their marriage. It finally broke up. But the kids would play mom against dad, and they would go to dad, who was the easier of the two. So it was the father so you had one parent that was supporting this. That created some family difficulties. And then this is where those waiting in the wings online or in schools, right? Immersion into the trans cult. Somebody helped this child, or as a young person, eventually go so far as to change his name legally.
And we're talking about things we're talking about people doing things to kids that are criminal. Coercion, extortion, intimidation.
Correct.
I think bullying is even now a crime. So, what's going on? How can we allow this? How come nobody's calling them out and putting them in jail?
Well, because once they get into schools, they can do that.
But you have the next one there, early antagonism regarding Christianity and Catholicism. And we now have a huge issue with anti-Semitism in Canada particularly. But there is such a movement, I'll say anti-Christian particularly, across our nations and in Canada particularly. And it's in the schools, and it's in society, and it's in the workplace. And so children are being taught by their parents to hate. They're taught to hate. We used to be taught to love. It is so convoluted. And, we used to be taught respect. And whether you believe in a particular form of religion or not, we were taught to look for ourselves, read the Bible, and now it's just, you hate everything that represents any kind of normalcy in life, especially religion.
As a matter of fact, it fosters also, so you really have this convergence of things that are going on in the home, of course. But again, by the time somebody reaches graduating of college age, we need to place a responsibility on that person. We all know plenty of people who were abused as kids and turn out well-adjusted, that they focus on being pro-social rather than antisocial. But again, we're fostering this self-centeredness. That's what trans ideology does. It teaches them to go within, not for a productive sense, but that their feelings or happiness matters rather than character development. And it used to be that psychology was all about helping someone think outside of themselves, become socially adjusted, even in NA or AA, the 12 steps. But again, the lack of accountability and responsibility and exaggerated sense of entitlement, refusal to acknowledge and submit to truth. So if you tell a kid there is no truth, then they don't have to, then they become the arbiter. So there's conscience, right? They can override truth, ignore truth, override conscience, and therefore somebody else's boundaries. And lack of willingness to face hard things. They develop a victim mentality and failure to launch. There are plenty of survivors who exemplify a propensity toward being overly responsible. Okay, so meaning what is it then? If these kids came out of a home that wasn't working all that well, should we, blame the parents? No, because we find plenty of examples. What's missing is, I'll refer to the 12 steps. Look at steps 4, 5. 12 steps have been around forever, so to speak, right? So conscience, that's step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. We are not teaching kids the importance of that. And how about this? So if you remove God, well, you can't do step 5, admit it to God, ourselves, and another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. Okay, there is right and wrong. And then here's what's important. We were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. So if you teach a kid that they are the arbiter of truth, that it's all about self, that they have the right to be happy, and if that doesn't happen, and they don't have to worry about right and wrong, there will be no eternal accountability. So now they walk through life. It's all about self. They demand people affirm them. They demand the use of pronouns. So it's all about self. They've never addressed their issues, their true hurts, and their issues of character. And then they get into the media. They're isolated. What kind of media do they start to get into? And before you know it, they can open the door up to what we now are going to see, what we saw in that gun shop. What's important to know is this. He did not have a mental disorder. Now, he had abnormal behavior by shooting someone, absolute meaning extreme, but he didn't stand out. He didn't have all sorts of tattoos. He wasn't demanding attention in that store. He wasn't standing at, didn't look depressed, didn't look anxious. What did he look like? He looked normal. That is not mental illness.
He didn't look like a girl.
Right? He looked like a girl. But what I want people to understand is he wouldn't even fit into, we could say personality disorder, but I would say he doesn't even, now, a 3-minute video on a showroom floor does not, reveal everything, but he wasn't demanding attention. He was socially appropriate. He was polite. He was wearing a shirt that talked about a healing place. He seemed mild-mannered. That's not narcissism. It wasn't all tatted out. It wasn't all pushy. It wasn't demanding his way. It wasn't arguing. Well, there goes antisocial. He's not narcissistic. He didn't stand out. So I would say he certainly, it's hard to say psychopathic not being personality disorder, but I want people to know he went far beyond personality disorder and then got into dark stuff. And now we're going to see the video he made of himself before the shooting, and watch as you're going to watch this, listen, and then we're going to analyze some of the symbols you're going to see on these weapons and magazines. That's him.
I don't remember how far we went.
That's in an ancient language, by the way. He memorized all that. Be able to write it. It's called Cyrillic.
His own writing, John?
No, that is ancient Cyrillic. All those sentences make sense, so he's not psychotic.
I can't do this anymore. I can't do this.
Notice how it changed right there. See that little, there we go. See the middle of that? Why the break? Now he's got a gun. That's demonic. Now, I work with survivors that will have something like, but not like that. There's a big difference. And survivors don't go out and shoot up kids.
It's over. It's over. It's over. It's over.
Very methodical.
I love you all. Maybe I look like a cop and I won't get rushed or something. I don't know. Shit, let's fucking do this before things already kicks in. Yep. Oh yeah. Check this out. Got more Jew gas.
He was gonna bolt the doors in the church with that board, so the kids couldn't get out.
Knew exactly what he was doing. This is not
Very methodical.
Yeah. Very planned out. Wow.
Tomorrow. I love you.
Yeah, where's your God? Interesting, eh? So that anti-Christian rhetoric.
It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel really good. 9mm go. 9mm go. Bang.
Because Jesus is up on a target.
Wow.
I'm the worker, baby. Why so yes?
That was from the movie Batman, where Joker is evil.
Where's your thinking? Shit. Skibbity Riz. God.
Look at that symbol. We're going to see that in a moment. There's the pentagram. Look at it down the bottom. We've got 666.
The big boy. Fucking rip and tear.
He was certainly well equipped, wasn't he?
Don't forget to live.
Okay, we'll stop it at this point. Just interest in time. People can go on. I don't have the exact URL for that. You can go online and find that. So we see very methodical. We can see hear different voices coming out of him. We've got certain symbols. We'll see here momentarily where those symbols come from, and a lot of hatred toward God. Jesus is on a target practice, right? But very methodical. Look at how precisely we can see he was almost obsessive compulsive. Each of those are placed in just distinct order, but there's a rationale behind all that. Brad, your thoughts as you're watching that?
I'm sitting here flabbergasted that the guy's been able to gather that much ammunition, that many rounds, that many cartridges, that many guns, and be able to execute something like this and carry this whole plan out. To have that kind of freedom and time, if your kids are sitting at home alone in their bedrooms, you need to get off your ass as a parent and get up right now and go and have a conversation, because I tell you what, this isn't going to stop anything. This will continue until we parents take control back and start to engage with family and with our own children.
I think you're right in the sense there, Brad. Sorry, John. Just the sense that how did they never went into his room, or I mean, this stuff's lying out in the open, man. I don't know. I have an adult son living with me because of a car injury, car accident, and he don't close his door or lock his door, and I'm invited in, and if I wasn't, I'd knock on the door and say, hey Matt, just come and talk, but they're not seeing this. That just it kind of breaks my heart. But what really breaks my heart is those children that he killed, and all the ones he injured. Yeah, because somebody didn't step in.
I had seen a very powerful clip, and my apologies, I thought I had it ready. It turns out he was living with his girlfriend and had just broken up about a week or two earlier. His girlfriend had gotten them into, or they were both furries. They were also into character acting and different things, but we've talked about furries.
Yeah.
He then got tired of furries, apparently, but the one thing that is worthy of note in his journal is that he talked about wanting to kill her. And he fantasized over killing her. He thought she was a joke. The fact that he was walking around one day with a loaded pistol, she thought it was airsoft. And he writes in his journal, these are all sorts of quotes. She's such a stupid bee. She doesn't even know I'm walking around with it loaded. I'm wondering what it would like to be able to shoot her in the head. He thought about stabbing her in the heart multiple times just prior to going to the kids, but he thought he might be stopped. He thought about killing her on close to his mother's birthday, but that would ruin the birthday for the mother. He was a misogynist. He had nothing but disdain. They went on a hike. He was behind her. He apparently pulled out his gun and was pointing it at the back of her head. She didn't even notice.
I am way too horny to talk to this woman right now.
The deranged transgender Minnesota shooter Robert Westman had recently dumped his longtime girlfriend, who was reportedly a furry, describing the ex as the root of my suffering in a twisted manifesto. This breakup just weeks before the deadly attack adds a chilling layer to the story that's unfolding. So I'm Joseph Morris, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Now the ex has been identified as 22-year-old Abigail Bodick, previously pictured on social media donning cat ears and whiskers at an anime convention earlier this year. But here's where it gets even darker. In a series of sick documents linked to Robert after the shooting, he repeatedly referred to a person named Abby, blaming her as the key trigger for his deranged behavior in his manifesto. He also wrote about being fascinated by furries, people who enjoy dressing up as cartoonish animals, writing, "I like feeling sexy and cute, but my face never matches how I feel. I hate my face. Maybe that's why I like furries so much. You can give yourself a new body and face. Several social media photos dating back to at least 2022 showed the couple posing together in happier times. The smiling pair was pictured selling items at a craft event, dressing up for a local Renaissance fair, and visiting an aquarium together. They even shared a one-bedroom apartment at Linwood Commons Apartments, about a 10-minute drive from the church. But Robert moved out in the last weeks of his life, staying with a friend instead. It wasn't clear exactly when things ended, but Robert's father told investigators after the shooting that his son recently broke up with a significant and/or romantic partner. And in those unhinged entries before the shooting, Robert said he wished he never met his ex, writing, "Abby is such a baby. I should have never started dating her. I'm not spending my life with a blue-haired and pronouns having ass bitch. You're lucky I have bigger plans than you." The details grow more disturbing. The manifesto, written in Cyrillic letters, reveals Robert admitted to pointing a pistol at the back of Abigail's head, writing, quote, "I wanted to see if I could feel anything," end quote, and feeling no remorse, only concerned about how murdering her would affect his plans, writing, "It felt good actually to point it right at her stupid head. Abby is so stupid. I've been handling and walking with it holstered, exposed all day, and she still thinks it's airsoft. Dumb ass b****. It's a real gun. I bought it to kill kids." Robert fantasized about revealing his murderous intent to Abigail, writing, "I want to see the look of horror and tears on her face as she realizes what a monster I am." And even considered stabbing her, writing, "If I feel like I could do it, I would then stab her in the heart many times and go commit my final act." The manifesto also mentioned planning the attack potentially on Abigail's birthday, writing on July 8th, "I will kill. Abby has pushed me to the edge. I was thinking it would be hilarious if I did my attack on Abby's birthday. If I don't kill her, that would forever ruin her birthday. But her B-day is also my mom's birthday, so I don't want to do that." Robert left Abigail's name off his note he left before he took his own life, addressing it only to family and 2 close friends, writing, "I think I will leave Abby alive so she can read this and feel all the she put me through. You, Abby. I hope everyone blames you for making me do this. It's your fault." An Instagram account linked to Abigail has a profile image of a furry, and she attended an anime detour convention in March dressed in blue furry cat ears and painted whiskers. Videos show the pair together, including one with ominous music where Robert grins with bright pink hair, followed by Abigail with audio saying, "I'm way too horny to talk to this woman right now."
She broke up. Somebody broke up with somebody a week prior. So this is the kind of individual, again, we're talking about, that purely psychopathic. Let's now look at the symbolism so people can see that it's all these factors that we've talked about, including once these kids start to dabble in stuff, what's going to come their way.
You guys looked into some of the symbolism on the weapons that I had never heard about before, and you guys were actually talking to me about it a little bit in the green room. What were those things you guys were talking about?
Go ahead, Rob. I'll let you start. I heard this from some of the Zoomers in our Telegram. Actually, they had been clued in on these groups from a couple of the more recent other school shootings. That there are 2 groups. One is called Order of the 9 Angles. Not Order of the 9 Angels, it's Angles. And the other is called 746, I think. They're both like satanic, occultist, anarchist groups is the best way to describe them. A lot of people describe O9A as neo-Nazi, but it's really more of just pure anarchy. They might like say hate Jews in that way of neo-Nazism, but they're not like political or authoritarian. It's just pure anarchy. So they are 2 satanic anarchist groups. O9A was apparently started by someone with connections to the British MI6, which is interesting that it has 3-letter agency connections. But I guess 746 is an offshoot of that. less politically or less ideological in terms of like their anarchist stuff than O9A, but they, I guess, tend to find young teenagers on things like Discord and groom them in a sense using stuff like child porn to get them to self-harm, to get them to transition, and to get them to ultimately end their lives in extreme acts of violence like this.
Yeah.
And this guy had symbols on the weapons and social media accounts of both of these groups. Now, whether he has any official affiliation or contact with them is hard to say, but he definitely at least knew of them and seems to have very similar motivations to them.
Right.
We're going to add, now we're going to look at the female school shooter, but then, and as you were talking about, some guys have been recently busted raping kids. So we're going to see there's an overlap. Now let me see if I can do this properly. I don't know if I did the sound. Well, so much for my ability. Anyways, okay, so there's the Tennessee school shooter. Look at some of these quotes down here. I want to kill you, little C. One page from the manifesto reads, bunch of little F's with your white privilege, F-U-F. Over on the right, want to kill all of you little, probably female word there. One page from the manifesto reads, a bunch of little F's. Okay, down here. Hale's manifesto includes an hour-by-hour, now she was age 28, hour-by-hour calendar of the tragic day, which Hale called Death Day, including everything from getting dressed, eating breakfast, to prepare for the attack and time to die. I'm a little nervous, but excited too. Been excited for the past 2 weeks. Hale allegedly wrote, can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm ready. I hope my victims aren't. Hale also wrote about her desire to have a high death count. They found the vehicle of this gal. Look at the decal in the back window. Does it matter? Well, you're going to put something on. Something means something. If you're going to put on your vehicle, I looked it up. It is a skateboarding.
It is. You see that all over binders at school. You see them wearing their patches. You see them wearing their clothes.
Right.
Bottom line is they've attached themselves to those kids, again, who are isolated from family and out left to do whatever they want to do.
There you go. And it introduces, so here's the actual website from that. So you can see the bottom right corner here of their merch or merchandise. So there's that same thing, but also look at what they sell. Now the question is this, why do they have to add the pentagram? There's only one reason. That's the number one satanic symbol. So it's a culture. But again, not every kid that skateboards is going to get into it, but the more you get into a certain culture, you're also a peer group and social cultures, you're going to start to see the introduction, same thing that we see within the trans community. You're going to see the introduction of pentagrams. And what do these two have in common in terms of media? Let me go to this. Now, the gun right here is the female shooters. Okay, the same symbol. She actually was in art school. This is a artistic rendering she made, and I had to go looking for, first of all, look at the statements that she had in her drawing. So we have with the Minnesota shooter, why so serious? He chuckles to himself. The Tennessee female shooter, right? I knew that statement. When I'm home, here's Johnny. Well, where does that come from? The Shining. Okay, that's been around a while. But every time I looked up a screenshot about where the guy is saying, here's Johnny, you know, we have that look, that face. But I saw there's apparently a new making of The Shining, and I found the picture. So, and it's interesting. It seems that there's this site called The Shining Horror Movies. Okay, and that's where she got this from. And she drew the female shooter, 28-year-old in Tennessee, made a lot of this out of sentences. So you can see that she was steeped in this media. And what happens? They open themselves up to dark. They invite darkness.
Absolutely. There's something else there, John, though, that she was talking about white privilege. but she's white herself. Isn't that interesting? You know, it kind of is like, what are you talking about, girl? You know, it just, well, again, everything's convoluted.
That's right. So the things that are not being talked about as far as the contributing factors are the sense of self-entitlement. Now, the Tennessee female shooter was on heavy medication. It was on a lot of the antidepressants and whatnot.
And trans meds too, right? She was on hormones.
Yes, that's right. So she'd been taking a lot of hormones. So there's the impact of pharmaceuticals. But on top of everything else, we have a sense of self-entitlement. We have anger. Then they get into, there's no other way to put it. If you've got satanic symbolism on your weapons, you've introduced, you've opened, and if you're filling your mind with horror movies, well, you're probably going to open yourself up to it. And then they add the porn. And within the alternative lifestyles and then the trans stuff, you've got some very deviant and dark things. And you were just referencing, we're going to hear about this story, that you're going to see that these young kids are either being groomed into it, or as they get older, they're starting to go into it. As a matter of fact, let me show you one influence. This is an individual who has become fixated on me. Matt Osborne has a little online blog called The Distance. He is a gossip and slime columnist like the National Enquirer. They always have multiple fake accounts. He is an AGP, autogonophile, cross-dressing guy, or he pushes that. So I believe he actually is into the sissification of young people.
Parents, are you sitting down because you're about to hear what the sexually deviant LGBTQ radical activist Matt Osborne, who reviews books for minors for GenSpect, feels is appropriate for kids to read? As you hear the following, ask yourself the question, what in the world is any guy, let alone a single man, who is active in sexually deviant lifestyles and activities, doing, showing such interest in the sexuality of other people's kids, and thinking this is something that is fine for kids to read or have read to them? This is the guy who launched the smear and slime campaign against John Euler.
My penis can't erect. A guy touching it triggers pain. Orgasms feel like there was no climax at all, just a sensation of fluid coming out.
This particular LGBTQ closeted AGP activist morphed into his current twisted state because of the significant amount of pornography he has consumed over the years, which has taken him well beyond his previous level of accessing warped and vile homoerotic material, taken him beyond accessing barely legal, and even well beyond accessing bestiality porn, which is one of the reasons he no doubt secretly enjoys engaging in furries, where he can hide 100% of his identity underneath his bright and deceptive mascot-like costume, while accessing kids who think furries is a safe activity for minors. He has moved deeper into deviance to where he now accesses online material via secret virtual private network, where he can connect and share with other equally twisted and deviant males, which has caused him to morph into a not-so-covert minor attracted person, or a MAP, which is simply an attempt at rebranding and airbrushing over pedophilia.
Wow. Parents, did you catch what's happening in this drawing, boldly posted by Matt Osborne on one of his many fake sock puppet accounts on Twitter, or X, the one he has used most often to smear and slander John Euler, his deviant AGP profile, a play on the letters AGP? Just look at what is being portrayed. There is an obvious adult male checking out two young kids. Those two kids can't be any more than age 11 or 12, like in 5th or 6th grade. And you can see the two kids are holding hands, and the young boy on the left is clearly getting upset as he sees the adult, Mr. Big Meat, checking his young girlfriend out. Just let this sink in. He's making his move on the boy, not the young girl, because this adult, like Matt, has special plans for this young, naive male. Again, Matt had this posted proudly on his fake Twitter page, Auto Gamp Egg. It fits exactly with another of Matt's AGP posts on yet another of Matt's multiple fake Twitter accounts, which shows what would appear as a scantily dressed young female dressed in a little nightie who is likely according to Matt's AGP sexual fetish, which, of course, is really just rebranded perversion. An underaged sissified male, which, given it says AGP, this would be a young male who is now dressing as a seductive female to be easy prey. In Matt's twisted, deviant world, this would be an underage sissified male, which, given it says AGP, this would be a young male who is now dressing as a seductive female to be easy prey, to serve as fresh meat for such predators, and to be led away by the predators who have targeted the young man. These posts clearly show who Matt is, and reveal the degree of deviance of such men who try to normalize what they're into. Given how fixed he is in his deviance, we shouldn't really be surprised to see that Matt puts it right out there in plain sight. So, what do we see happening months later? We see that this adult male deviant has managed to sissify his young male target into a buxom blonde female through what is called transmaxing or forced feminization, which is part and parcel of the LGBTQ lifestyle, and is exactly what Matt is into, and is why Matt wants unfettered access to minors, especially minor males. And this Matt Osborne, along with the equally deviant and deceptive Sierra Weir, are the very same ones who crafted the scheme to slime, slander, and target John Euler. To cancel John, to silence him, to dox him, and to try to do as much damage as possible to John personally and professionally, all because John has been over the target.
Over on the right, here is the posting that I put together. You see the two naked men there that are with these young kids that fits the definition of a mandated report, and Matt wouldn't answer. Do those men down on the bottom right, should they be criminally charged and prosecuted? And he said, well, context matters. Did the kids come up to them? Did the kids invade the adult spaces? So, and then I challenged him to come on our program, a live debate, and he went away for about 9 months and then came back with a slime campaign.
But this is the same. This is
sexualization of these kids.
Same issue, right and wrong. It's a simple question. It's a simple question. They should be charged, absolutely.
There we go. So,
but let's talk about all the context.
Should be. They will be. Let me tell you, they will be one day soon. Because I tell you what, the landscape in the USA has changed that dramatically that, Matt, you better wake up because things are about to happen in your world, buddy. And don't forget, you started this.
There we go. Let's find out then what porn. So the thing that I haven't heard talked about, we haven't heard talked about, Ann and Brad, is, again, the dark stuff that these kids get into, the myopic self-centeredness. It helps reframe the world to where the world revolves around them. No boundaries. You have to adhere to my language, my pronouns. So you have a very a growing self-centeredness, self-entitlement. You then add the negative dark stuff, influence of Satanism, and you add porn, and what might you get?
A 25-year-old man in Ontario, Canada, has been charged with breaking into a family's home in Welland and sexually assaulting their toddler. Daniel Danny Senecal identified himself as using she/her on his Facebook profile and displayed the trans pride flag in his biography. On Sunday, August 31st, police and paramedics were called to a home near Crowland Avenue and York Street in Welland for a medical assistance call involving a young child. When emergency first responders arrived, they discovered the front door of the home showed signs of being forced open and the child was suffering from serious injuries. Officers secured the scene and canvassed the neighborhood shortly thereafter. Investigators say a witness came forward with surveillance video, and the suspect was quickly identified as Daniel Senecal. Senecal was taken into custody and charged with aggravated sexual assault on a child, assault by choking, breaking and entering a home, and sexual interference with a child. His young female victim has been transported out of region for advanced medical care, but she has been declared to be stable. After interviewing the parents, Niagara Police issued a news release describing Senecal as a stranger had broken into the family's home sometime between 10 p.m. and 8:59 a.m. and sexually assaulted their sleeping toddler. While police attempted to portray the crime as a stranger attack, the National Post has since reported that several friends of the victim's mother say the man arrested was known to the victim's family and had previous contact with the toddler he assaulted. Locals also expressed confusion as to why police described it as a stranger attack when that was not the case. Another mother in the area told the National Post that Senecal had sexually assaulted her young son in 2021. She said he was arrested, charged, and after 2 years of court hearings was sentenced to 18 months in jail, but was released 6 months early in early March. While little is known about Senecal's past, a Facebook page has been uncovered, showing that he appears to have recently adopted a transgender identity. While police attempted to portray the crime as a stranger attack, the National Post has since reported that several friends of the victim's mother say the man arrested was known to the victim's family and had previous contact with the toddler he assaulted. Locals also expressed confusion as to why police described it as a stranger attack, when that was not the case. Another mother in the area told the National Post that Senecal had sexually assaulted her young son in 2021. She said he was arrested, charged, and after 2 years of court hearings was sentenced to 18 months in jail, but was released 6 months early in early March. While little is known about Senecal's past, a Facebook page has been uncovered showing that he appears to have recently adopted a transgender identity that several friends...
There we go. So, again...
Yes, I want to talk. There's several things here, John, that just really annoy me. And that is this whole idea of calling this sexual assault. You know, we have so minimized the language. And so this is aggressive. This is an aggravated sexual assault. So my understanding, it was rape.
It's the heinous rape of a child, an infant.
Yes. Sexual assault to me is that, you kind of, you maybe touch someone inappropriately or something like that. But, we need to go back to what we used to call the words rape. And the other thing is he was charged with choking. Well, how about attempted murder? Let's get down to this. We need to have these people behind bars, and we're having a problem. Certainly in Ontario, there's a backlash happening now, thank God, across Canada, because people are recognizing that these individuals, a 12-year-old shot a homeowner. There were several, I think there were 5 that came into the home. Brad, you probably know this better than I
do.
But
Burlington, Ontario, or Brantford, one of the two, and they went in, and they the 12-year-old pulled the trigger, and that's just irreversible.
Out on bail. The 12-year-old was out on bail.
Yeah, that's right.
So these are young kids, and then later that same week, a 14-year-old out on bail, committing heinous crimes. And so not only have we seen the deconstruction of family, now we're seeing these children that are repeatedly not only not given any boundaries, but they are released into society.
We're in a catch and release society here in Canada. That's what's going on with our justice system. We definitely have some problems that we need to take care of. City mayors across the country are starting to speak up a little bit about the crime and the terror that's going on within cities all across our country. It's going to take the government to step up and do the right thing. Unfortunately, we just don't have that government in power. Elbows up, everybody.
Yeah, are you happy now? Because what we are seeing, and I mean, when you think that somebody like this, and yes, this is the next thing, that has already offended, has had sexual offenses, and here, just again, and young children, this little child will be in hospital for a little while, I would suspect. And I can't even begin to imagine the ramifications for this child over the long run. And this person, how long again till he's on the street?
That's right. And the thing that is not being talked about is what we'll end with. We're going to show a 3-minute video of the proof of the detrimental effects of porn, especially in the male brain. It's going to affect both, but there's a difference from male versus female sexuality It's very rare that you read of a female who's been arrested for a sex offense that has used an object on the child or their victim. Okay, that is a uniquely male pattern. And within the trans movement, you have no trans movement without pornography. And all it takes is a sense of entitlement. It takes a lack of boundaries. These kids are groomed, and then some of them will take it to the next level. Satanism, we've now seen the symbols on the two guns, the male shooter, the female shooter. We've seen a lot of different pictures, and the merging of the Church of Satan, satanic stuff that feeds into why? Because do what thou wilt. As a whole of the law, Aleister Crowley, right? So it's very much, I'm the arbiter of truth. I'm the arbiter of reality. What I say goes. I become God in my own life, and don't you dare transgress. That's already bad enough. But then you add porn to it, and porn, drug, sex, rock and roll, those are all doorways into the spiritual realm, and you actually may open up for yourself more than you're bargaining for. So porn is a significant issue that's not being talked about, that behind all the trans stuff, it's saturated with porn. Let's find out what porn does to the human brain, but especially the male brain, and we can see what happens. You don't have women breaking in and raping toddlers like that. That's a male issue. We've unleashed countless numbers of these now into society.
Through research, and especially through SPECT scanning, we show that it's a brain problem because we actually see that there's areas that are overactive or underactive. You get this rush of adrenaline, so he gets that high, that whether it's masturbation or whatever it is that gets him to that point. But then you have this, just say like cocaine, after it's over though, you'll see this decreased blood flow again to the prefrontal cortex. This is a scan of a sex addict brain, an 18-year-old sex addict brain. And we compare that to a normal brain, and at the naked eye, we can tell this is not normal. Now, if we compare that to someone who has cocaine addiction, this is a person who has cocaine addiction. As you can tell, in the prefrontal cortex and the parietal lobe, they're very similar, although you don't see the top part of this brain. The scalloping is about the same if we looked at this sagittally. The prefrontal cortex, for lack of a better word, is our CEO. It really controls every other aspects of the brain. So the whole front part of our brain, this is what makes us human in general. Usually in sexual addiction, there's some low activation here. Our CEO drops off, we don't make good decisions. Normally in naked eye, you can tell that this is not particularly normal or healthy. This person's just not using as much brain because they're used to using the sex and other things to make their brain active. So the excitement of pornography. So we'll see a lot of the same deactivation from cocaine and sexual addiction. You can tell again from someone who's a normal brain, we obviously don't see that degree of scalloping. It takes over the mind.
So again, you have right, everything, it sets the stage for, so the ideology, what's going on for the kid as the kid's growing up. But all you have to do is add then a combination of, they're the center of the universe, their own world, they can determine right and wrong for themselves, there is no God. Now they're going to have unchecked selfishness. You then, so they become the focus of everything, of themselves, better not set boundaries. Then you introduce the trans stuff, and by introducing trans, you introduce porn, and along with porn and the trans stuff, then you have Satanism. You also have the media, the entertainment they're going to use, and now you have a cocktail for, as it were, brain damage. I mean, a kid's not thinking properly, a young man. He's changed his brain. He's become psychopathic. What is that? No conscience, no remorse, no empathy, and you've opened the door to very real darkness that may come in and settle at home.
Terrible.
It's very sad. And John, I mean, we know that pornography addiction begins very early with children. Now, I mean, children can get hooked, and depending on the physiology of the child, some are more easily addicted. You know, you can have a 9-year-old addicted to porn, and it just can take like that. Other children, it's not like that. They don't become addicted. They can put it off and leave it and let it go. But so many now are looking for something to feed that emptiness. That's where they find it.
They were just pictures when we were kids, just pictures. Now it's moving video with all the deviance that comes with it. It's gone too far. And Pornhub, MindGeek, the company out of Montreal, Canada, who is under no regulations, no stipulations, no backlash from Canadians that this is occurring in our country. We sit here and we say nothing. The sleeping elbows up crowd that doesn't really have a clue to what's going on in our beautiful country.
That's right.
Well, and thank you as always for joining us. Any last words?
For me, well, I just feel some of the weight. I think that's what I'm feeling tonight. In fact, I have been all week as I've heard of these violent atrocities, especially to young children. And I think, you know, but God. Sometimes I think, God, if you don't intervene, there's no hope. And we need hope in these days. And we need people to speak out, and we need people to stand up. So hopefully parents are listening and take action.
You know how I know God is actually involved is because he keeps pushing the three of us to keep moving forward and doing exactly what we're doing.
That's
so
right.
I've seen that and I feel that every single day. And I'm not the guy that would ever say that. Never in my lifetime would I ever use that language or those words. But I've learned a lot in the last 5 years, and that's one of them.
There you go. And I would simply end with this. Parents, if you see any of these warning signs with your kid, seek help. Don't be ashamed, but see the warning signs, but especially parents. If you are inclined, so I'll talk to the enabling or codependent parent or those that are just want things to be okay and go along, that if you have a parent that is pushing certain issues, you're going to have to be willing to step up and say enough is enough, draw some boundaries, and then if it's time to have your child sit down and see somebody, I would, as a parent, I would just ask then one primary question, which is, what's your view on porn? Is it neutral? Or is it dangerous? Is it a concern? Because I knew a parent that took their troubled teen to one of the DSM people listed at one of the 13, and the guy never touched the issue of porn. He actually told the parent, because the parent said, my kid's into porn. He said, well, it's not that big of a deal, according to this parent. So he downplayed the issue of porn and never touched on it, never brought it up. So
continue to engage with your kids, everyone. That's the biggest thing. You have to do this for them. Your kids aren't going to step up and say, hey, Mom, Dad, I'm feeling all this pressure and all this shit on my shoulders. They're not. You got to get involved. You got to go and communicate with them. You got to ask them what is going on in their world. And then you've got to stay involved in their world. And you've got to help them, I guess, break free of all of this nonsense that continues to bombard them and weight them down, from teachers to friends to peer pressure to magazines, movies, and other entertainers that continue to tell them they're on the right path. It's a crazy world out there, but it doesn't have to be. This started with right and wrong, and it ends with right and wrong. Am I right? I'm
Absolutely.
right. And that's where we need to be, is on the right side. I thank you both for being here. We can't do it without either one of you. You guys have put like 2 hours into this tonight, and it's fantastic. This is the episode I was waiting to do with both of you, because this is going to expose things about what's going on in a way that others haven't been able to do. They've been able to talk about the shootings, they've been able to talk about the shooters, but they don't get into the psyche and the depth that you brought tonight. So thank you both for that. I want to remind everybody, it's not our kids' fight, it's our fight. See you soon.